simply means like this.
John?
Understand that I'm just to welcome, and then I think Dr. Palik is taking
yes, sir.
the moderator.
Okay.
Are
Okay, thank you.
Today we are observing the World Competition Day, which has been. Sir, up here, please.
Sorry, I'm late.
Next, not
My apologies for disturbing you. See you.
We are observing the World Competition Day, which since 2010 has been adopted by the United Nations to be so. Although the concerns about fair trade practices has been since 1980, when UNCTAD for the first time on 5th December worked on the multilaterally agreed equitable principles and rules for the control of restricted business practices. But competition, the term competition has come into coinage since 2010, and we have been in cuts organizing this to keep spreading the consciousness about competition and its role in not only protecting the consumer but also in terms of how it benefits the economy at large. In the past years, we have been looking at different subjects. We have also looked at the spread of digital markets and how competition plays a very important role in that. But today we have this the subject for discussion, which is so much closer to human existence than anything has been ever before, which is the climate change. And as we've seen in COP27, the urgency of bringing to fore the agenda for moving towards net zero has been reiterated. India has also made its own commitments for 2030 as well as for 2070. And all this is going to completely reorient the way economic activity happens and in the manner in which the economies develop and grow. The transition is going to be painful, and I think it is important at this point of time for us to see how competition will play a major role in making this transition not only smooth but equitable, and also to be able to prevent the kind of concentration of power, economic power that is likely to happen. The important part in climate change, even though it looks like a esoteric subject at this point in time in the context of competition, is the fact that climate change action is driven by technology. And technologies are developing rapidly with a very strong IPR component, intellectual property rights component in it. So, which is driven by innovation, which also means exclusivity, which is in theoretical construct, we would call it anti-competitive. But at the same time, we need to remember also that without innovation, without a very rapid and large proliferation of new technologies, the transition also will be difficult. So how do we find this balance? And at all points of time to see that innovation is not stifled, but at the same time, it also doesn't result in concentration of power, economic power, and rise in already alarmingly rising inequality in the world. So I will stop here. It is my privilege to welcome today for this panel the chair and moderator for the session, Dr. Kirit Parekh, who is Chairman, Integrated Research and Action for Development. We have a special address by Ms. Jyoti Jinkar Bhanot, who is Head Antitrust Division and Secretary IC Competition Commission of India. On the panel, we have Dr. Dhanendra Kumar, who is former chairperson, Competition Commission of India, Mr. Augustine Peter, former member of Competition Commission of India, Ms. Abha Yadav, who is assistant professor of law in National Law University, Delhi, and Ms. Veena Saraswati, assistant professor, Institute for Studies in Industrial Development. It's a very powerful panel, and I'm sure at the end of these discussions, we would be able to have a much better understanding of the landscape that is unfolding before us. So I welcome all of you once again, and I request Dr. Kirit Pali to kindly moderate the session. Oh, you will be? Okay, I'm sorry, I request Mr. Roy to welcome.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Mara. First of all, I extend a warm welcome to all of you. On behalf of the faculty of ISID, the Institute in general, and particularly on behalf of the director, Professor Nagesh Kumar, who wanted to be part of this discussion, very interesting discussion that is going to happen today. But for some unavoidable preoccupation, he is not able to be here. And as Dr. Mayaram has mentioned, that today the discussion is in World Competition Day is related to climate change and the challenges that we are going to face, and how regulators, particularly from the perspective of competitive framework, how they want to respond to this challenge. That is the major point of discussion. We have a very interesting and very distinguished panel. As an economist, I would say that the climate change is probably one of the most important examples of market failure, in the sense that when we talk about climate change, it is basically the result of negative externalities that have been created in the process of production, and also with the motive of profit maximization, we end up to a situation where a collective bad has been created, and no one is here to own that. At the same time, we are not in a position to ignore it. And in this respect, we need to understand the changes, particularly in terms of redefining the market, in the sense that the premises on which market works on the basis of certain regulatory premises, and that need to be redefined in the sense that when market failure happens, generally in earlier situations also, when this kind of market failure happens, it has to be responded by some kind of regulatory response which invokes some kind of collective action. And this collective action may be cooperative, reflected through legal measures or beyond legality as well, because the institutions need to also respond to this kind of change. And I would say that earlier we used to talk about competition in terms of whether you are able to produce at a minimum cost or not. But now some other thing need to be introduced into that, because it is not only producing at a minimum cost, we need to also interiorize some kind of what you can say the issues of climate change in the form of sustainability benefits, both in the utility function as well as in the cost function. Because it is not enough to produce at a minimum cost. Rather, we need to respond to a situation where this sustainability benefit should be part of our cost calculation, so that society at large is ready to pay the cost for that, which is a long-term goal. And at the same time, it has to be responded in a manner such that it also, the market asymmetries that emerge, that need to be taken into account through regulations. So of course there are experts who are working in this area for quite some time, so I'm not going to go into that. But what I would say that ISIT has a long tradition of working on anti-competitive trends that emerge in our society, in the functioning of the market. market because the founder of the institute, Professor S.K. Goyal, in 1979, wrote a book, Monopoly, Capital and Public Policy in India. So basically looking into the ill effects of the rise of monopolies and how it tries to corner the benefits by the few. And probably this kind of a challenge would also emerge in the context of climate change, which Mr. Mayaram has already hinted upon. That in the digital platform we see a rise of concentration and centralization of economic power. Whether this should become another area or space for that kind of concentration that the regulators need to take into account. So once again, I thank you all, and of course we are looking forward for a very fruitful intellectual engagement regarding the competition law and in the perspective of today's agenda, the climate change challenge. So, yes.
Technology challenge.
I put all my notes in the computer, but I mean, one piece where it doesn't seem to open.
We are observing the World Competition Day, which since 2010 has been adopted by the United Nations.
Scattered in some sense because my notes I cannot look at.
Would you like me to help you?
Huh?
Would you like me to help you with it?
Yeah, here it is, but it.
Yeah.
Anyway, let me begin. Mr. Mahara and many distinguished panelists are labeled here on the dais, and very interested audience. I hope it is because there was one turn up here. So thank you all for being here. I think I would turn around our competition commission or competition climate with climate change and competition. What are the issues in climate change and where do you think in the end competition would require and what role can it play in mitigating climate change? I think first of all the question is that climate change requires action by all the countries, some more and some less, but by and large all countries have to act on it. We also see that this would largely involve adopting and adapting new technologies, and this requires skills and this requires finance because many of these new technologies cost more than the existing one. And secondly, I don't know what is happening here. Secondly, I think these new technologies are high cost, at least upfront high cost. Today we know that we can have solar power at almost the same cost as coal power, but if you look at the initial investment to replace 1 kilowatt of solar core capacity, you would need to invest in 4 kilowatt of solar capacity because the solar power generates power only 20%, whereas the coal power can generate power for 80% of the time. That means the upfront investment required would be at least, you might say, more like 6 times as high as this. So finance becomes a very, very critical issue in getting this. At the same time, as we all know, there is a huge urgency of action. The window is closing. 1.5 is, I think, clearly become out of the question. And you don't see any real acceleration of action by the countries which have to really take the lead, the industrialized countries. I think they are unwilling to accept the responsibility for all the damage they have done, and they are likely to do that. And that's why I think it becomes important to understand what kind of competition or what kind of regulation can help us. Now there is in the world, in this new technologies, there is a huge asymmetry of action. New technologies that developed by some people in some countries, but it's not easily available to others. We have seen in the case of the COVID vaccine case, the US was holding large amount of vaccines, which is eventually didn't use, and did not give it to others. And the vaccine manufacturers and made huge profits and so on. So this is really that asymmetry of knowledge, asymmetry of resources, financial resources, is a huge question. Now, we don't have a world government, so that it is very difficult to have the regulators that we have within a country for free market. And that, I think, within India, we have really a competition commission, and that can see that some level of competition is. Even then, one would argue that free market in a world where the resources are distributed unevenly doesn't necessarily increase the welfare of the society. And particularly when we have created so much of bads, as Professor Roy was saying, and that there is so much of externalities involved in it which do not enter into the profit loss statement of companies. Now we also seen that we also seen that the finance is a critical element, and that only those who have can in some sense provide it. But here I think governments can also play some role in it. We have seen, for example, in the case of pushing LED lights, companies on their own, industries on their own, would not have done what the government, through small amount of intervention, has been able to do. And what's the intervention? The intervention was that LED bulbs were costing about 300-400 rupees, I think, I forget exact number, and that once the government started making mass purchases of it, the price came down within a period of 6-7 months to less than 30-40 rupees. So still today, at least that's the price at which government is able to procure it. So I think you can see that some action, would we call it a competitive action, or is it an intervention in a market by government? Secondly, I think that what we need is, in this case, within a country, as I said, between photovoltaics and coal, competition has really pushed photovoltaic forward, despite the problem of high initial upfront cost that is required. What is really required is a finance available, low cost, low interest finance, which is not easily available, but I guess that we are gradually moving towards it. And that one might say that internationally, there are a number of agencies which want to support low carbon initiatives, but at what level they can accept interest reduction is not clear. What one can think of doing, of course, or hopefully, that a climate fund will be created which can really incentivize other financiers to give low carbon loan at concessional interest rate, and that the climate fund will bear the gap of interest payment between these two. But this has yet to happen. In some sense, it's not available at the moment. I think also the question is that we have to worry about not just bringing new technology for mitigation. Climate change also will require what do we do about adaptation? What do we do about loss and damage? As I said, these countries do not want to accept the responsibility. Now, a typical free market response for anything would be that you have a scarce resource and make a tax. And the point that people are often suggesting is that put a tax, a carbon tax. Carbon tax will motivate everyone to use, produce low carbon products and consume low carbon products, if it is universally accepted. But the critical resource that we are talking about is not carbon, CO2 itself, or emissions per year, which is what the tax would be on emissions per year. Critical resource that we have is the stock of CO2 in the atmosphere. So what should really do? One should really tax the stock of CO2 in the global atmosphere and tax people from the cumulative additions to the stock they have made. So 1990 to today's, then if you do that and just put a $1 per kilo per ton of CO2 tax on this, collected to be collected every year, you might say that yes, we have part that CO2 in the global atmosphere, and we are charging a parking fee of $1 per ton per year. Then you will be able to collect something like $700 billion a year, easily increasing gradually. And then you might say that yes, we have enough funds to do many things in a more sensible, realistic, competitive way, because then you could say, I can make finance easily available, I can buy technologies and provide technologies at a concessional rate to developing countries, as has been done, say, in terms of many drugs and medicines has been done. And I think so it becomes possible to do these kind of things if we tax global stock of carbon. But then you have to say, there's many advantages, because that could really incentivize people to postpone their emissions. That will incentivize them to resort to negative emissions, because then their contribution to stock would be reduced, and so on. So we can also design some ways to give the money that is collected in such a way that the countries have an incentive to do their mitigation. So suppose 80% of the tax that a country pays can be given back to it to finance its carbon mitigation, climate change activities. Then, people say, we're not just giving money, we are doing something, but it is conditional on that taking certain actions that they get the money back. So there are a number of measures that one can think of, and within a country, yes, we really need to worry about how are we going to deal with adaptation and how are we going to deal with loss and damage. Yeah, we take care of extreme events, but not everybody gets fully compensated for the loss and damage. And whether competition and any kind of competitive action can help you or not is not clear. So, but I think that should be maybe a point that many of my panel would have ideas to contribute to. So thanks a lot, and I'm happy to be here. I hope this is something that is of usefulness. Please, I think the next is Professor Mano.
Thank you, sir. Eminent persons on the dais, organizers, participants. It's indeed a privilege and pleasure for me to be here on this occasion when we are discussing on competition policy and climate change on the occasion of the World Competition Day. I congratulate CUTS and ISFID for instituting and organizing such an important annual event and initiating discussions on vital contemporary emerging issues on this topic. Innovation and competition are two of the most important pillars which support and foster growth in the economy. However, it is being increasingly recognized that these pillars need to be supported by sustainable development for safe, secure and livable future. Recently, when the world leaders gathered for Climate Implementation Summit on 7th and 8th November 2022, some of the experts in the field during the conference noted that technology transfer is crucial for the success of global green transition, whether it is in energy, infrastructure, mobility or food. We need to make sure that knowledge is shared to help build up industrial capacity and support countries to tackle the climate crisis. Till very recently, most of the measures which were taken to combat climate change were primarily based on control and command, government-driven policies. However, the trend towards adopting market-based instruments for environment protection, in addition to command and control regulation, has intensified the relationship between economics and environment. And in this backdrop of these developments, competition is set to play an even more important role in fighting climate change. Competition supports environmental goals and produces the most efficient results when consumers are willing to pay for more sustainable products, encouraging companies to invest in green products. And from the perspective of the competition law, many questions arise for the competition authorities in this scenario. Firstly, it is that is there a role for a competition authority in the matters related to sustainability? And if indeed there is a role, then what that can be? And definitely the answer to the first question to my mind is a big yes. As regards the second question, competition law and environment protection objectives to my mind are often interdependent. For instance, when anti-competitive harm and environmental damage occur at the same time, examples including the greenwashing cartel, in which corporates can collectively overcharge consumers in the name of environmental protection, or corporates deliberately or jointly reduce competition over product differentiation parameters relating to sustainable products. So there is some kind of a meeting of mind that we will not compete on the basis of pro-environment friendly parameters, which in terms of our law would amount to a cartelization. Similarly, there could be anti-competitive agreements in the form of exclusionary activities when the corporates may collude to delay market introduction of green technologies or agree not to promote the environment performance of their products. So these are some of the conducts which immediately will fall within the ambit of the competition law from the perspective of competition. On the other hand, achieving sustainability goals may at times require industry-wide agreements, collaborations between competitors or entities linked vertically in a given industry, exchange of information, technology and significant investment. And this is where the complexity comes in and a challenge for the competition authorities. Now, some of these collaborations related initiatives may result also parallelly in restricting and stifling of competition and may thus fall foul of the antitrust rules. So while sustainability goals are the need of the hour, at the same time, competition compliance with the competition law provisions are of equal importance, and the challenge for the competition authority in such scenarios is how to balance these seemingly conflicting objectives. How to assess sustainability factors in competition assessment, how to weigh the benefits of sustainability considerations against the adverse effects emanating out of anti-competitive conduct. Now talking about CCI, so far experience of CCI about the interface between environment and market competition has been limited. However, now increasingly as the environment consciousness is echoing in India, and enterprises are also embracing environment-friendly technologies and offering products and services, and consumers are also becoming very conscious about using these products. I think competition law in India also cannot remain insulated from environmental concerns. So the impending question which may come up is that how CCI will handle agreements which may have elements which may apparently fall in the category of anti-competitive agreements in the traditional sense, but yield significantly large environment benefits. We have just emerged out of COVID-19, which further emphasized the need for clean and healthy environment, and the competition policy experience gained by CCI during the COVID-19 pandemic, in fact, could provide guidance and be a great source of inspiration for handling the challenge posed by sustainability-related issues. For your information, and some of you may already be aware, CCI as a forward-looking and agile market regulator issued advisory at the very beginning of initial stages of the pandemic, and this business advisory recognized that businesses may need to coordinate certain activities to ensure continued supply and fair distribution of products. So such coordination was permitted as long as it ensured continued supply and distribution of goods and services and resulted in efficiencies. And it was also clarified that only such conduct of businesses that is necessary and proportionate to address concerns arising out of COVID-19 will be considered. So I think this is the guiding principle, the necessity and the proportionality, which I think can provide very useful light on how to proceed in such matters. In fact, in my view, the Competition Act has inbuilt flexibility to allow for factoring sustainability-related aspects while assessing both the antitrust and the combination matters within the framework. For instance, the law provides that even in cases where corporates enter into agreements for sharing of technology or know-how, an exception to the presumptive rule of appreciable adverse effect on competition is applicable in case of joint ventures which enhance efficiency in terms of production, supply, distribution, storage, and etc. So I think as long as these arrangements are between competitors or vertically placed players are fitting into this, there is room for factoring these efficiency enhancing aspects. And even otherwise, the parties get an opportunity to rebut the presumption of appreciable adverse effect, which is usually associated with cartels in terms of the broad framework of for assessing appreciable adverse effect, which has several redeeming factors like scientific, technical, economic development, accrual of benefits to consumer in assessing the appreciable adverse effect in a particular case. So these gains therefore can be factored in by the Commission in its assessment exercise, and consumer welfare and efficiency factors could be presented as rebuttals by the parties concerned when sustainability-related arguments are involved. Similarly, in the case of abuse of dominance matters, and it, as was highlighted, with the access to technology, it is increasingly likely to increase market concentration and result in further dominance. Our law allows for factoring in parameters like holding the intellectual property and social obligations, social costs, relative advantage by way of contribution to economic development, and any other factors while assessing the dominance itself. And similarly, while assessing the combinations, we can take into account nature and extent of innovation, related advantage by way of contribution to economic development, by any combination having or likely to have appreciable adverse effect on combination. So in nutshell, the Act provides a lot of leeway and is very forward-looking. To my mind, going forward, these issues can squarely be factored in the assessment process. And similarly, as was mentioned about that with access to this technology, there may be tendency basically to impose higher costs and not give access to others. So while on one hand, we would always take into account the objective justification in terms of their need to protect their intellectual property rights. However, again, the test of proportionality and necessity would apply, and any unfair impositions and denials could be examined within the framework of the Section 4, which is the abuse of dominance. However, the challenge in accounting for sustainability aspects in competition assessment would remain, as it may be difficult to measure the benefit the consumers receive and the gains such as improvement of the living environment. The benefits may be long-term and not immediate. They may not be restricted to the purchaser or the users of the goods and services, but to the entire society. And so how do you basically quantify and do the economic assessment, which is that you need to weigh the anti-competitive effect vis-a-vis the benefits to the overall society and the consumers on account of the sustainability. And here I think the jurisprudence which has developed in other mature jurisdictions in some areas could provide I think some guidance, which of course would need to be suitably adapted, accounting for our domestic specificities. So I think to conclude, we are at a juncture where it is critical to ensure that we create a society which is fair, green, sustainable, and CCI is aware that consumer benefit from competition through lower prices, sustainable quality, and wider choice of new and improved goods and services needs to be encouraged. And we will definitely factor in the efficiency enhancements in resource use in an environmentally friendly manner, and due attention will be given to this. And this, of course, this would require increased collaboration between industry, policymaker, and think tanks to basically mull on the possible issues and explore the solutions to strike the right balance. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Professor Gano. I think you pointed out the difficulties of really balancing and competition in some sense. May I now invite the panelists, Mr. Dhanendra Kumar, the first one, and I think maybe you can take about 7 to 10 minutes.
Sure. Maybe I can take a bit less, maybe more for my colleagues, the economists. Thank you very much, Dr. Parikh, my distinguished colleague, Mr. Arvind Mayaram, and Jyoti Jungar, Augustine Peter, the other distinguished participants. It's a great pleasure and privilege for me to be invited for this very contemporary and very vital subject discussion. I must compliment Kurtz for 2 things. Number one, for now, it is accepted that the Competition Day, World Competition Day, is being celebrated, commemorated on the 5th December, and they initiated it, and we all supported it, and it's come to stay. So my compliments to them for this. And now they have taken up this very vital subject for discussion on this day, competition policy and climate change. And again, this is something which is extremely relevant at this moment. And as Dr. Parikh mentioned about COP27, and my colleague, erstwhile colleague, Jyoti mentioned about the relevance of this to, rather than saying competition and climate change and competition. So she underlined that competition policy and competition law are adequately equipped to handle the challenges in this regard, and I completely agree with her on this. I feel that our competition law is flexible enough and has enough levers to take care of the important issues arising in this subject. The most important action or actionable points in this regard would be on the policy and implementation front by the governments and the policy makers to add a cost for carbon emission, as Mr. Parekh pointed out, and also for making technologies available to the various countries, especially those who do not have it and cannot afford it easily, to make sure that they also follow it. When I was in the World Bank, we had enough discussion on this subject, and we found that the countries which probably needed to do the most, the rich and the powerful countries, were always dragging their feet, and this has been obvious in the subsequent deliberations, the last one in Sharm el-Sheikh. But before that also, you could see that they were generally dragging their feet on meeting their obligations in contributing finances and also making technologies available to the industry. As far as the industry is concerned, we have to make them aware and sensitize that there is no option left now, and they have to adopt practices in reducing carbon emission. And now there are techniques available to measure what is the impact on the planet, how much carbon emission they are making in various stages and various operations in the value chain. Just for example, if they are getting any inputs, then getting the inputs would pass through various stages, including the logistics and transportation and so on. So at every stage, there would be certain element of carbon emission attached to it. So you can unitize it and you can subsequently account for that in the entire process of transportation and also consumption of the various inputs, how much has been the carbon emission, and therefore adding cost to it, one can say that the least carbon emitting operations or those industries could be incentivized, they could be funded or given funds at a lesser cost. So altogether, the whole thing should come out in the cost per unit for the consumers, and that would determine, as far as the competition is concerned, how to make sure that it is incentivized, and the competition commission and competition laws work towards making it more attractive for the consumers to purchase those goods and services which consume the least elements of carbon or emit the least carbon to the environment. This whole subject has been attracting debate around the world. European Commission took it up, and they described sustainable development as development that meets the needs of current generations without compromising the ability of future generation to meet theirs. And this is, I think, a very apt definition for this, and this has been also followed generally at a number of fora. In the other countries also, for example, Finnish judge expressed a similar sentiment at a conference, saying that it was time to reconsider the relationship between sustainability and antitrust, to ensure companies can operate on what is good for the planet. And this topic again surfaced at an important global conference at Oxford and University College of London. The UK government also asked CMA, Competition Market Authority, to give their recommendation to the UK government on sustainability and competition law, and they came up with a paper, and I got a copy of that. They made several recommendations on how to integrate considerations of carbon emissions in the various operations of the government, and also in the manufacturing operations too. We have to make sure that companies are made to realize that they cannot go on emitting carbon indefinitely without any cost attached to it. And that has to come to a stop. And we have to segment, and we have to make sure that the logistics, distribution, packaging, apart from manufacturing, each stage is accounted for the carbon emission. We have also to make sure that companies are allowed, in fact incentivized to collaborate to come to the least carbon emitting technologies and operations. And we have to also make sure that while these are allowed and facilitated in the competition law and not frowned upon, the first mover advantage of free rider concerns, they are taken into account. And therefore, at the end of the day, like what Jyoti mentioned, during the pandemic, when the TCI, they came up with their guidance note on allowing companies to work together during the pandemic in the interest of the consumers. We possibly have to come up with a similar situation. I mean, let us face it, that it has to be set out upfront. So if PCI, for example, comes out with a guidance note like what they did in the pandemic days, that companies would be allowed, or they would be expected to collaborate in case it is required. So under section 19.3 and section 19.4, these factors would be, and this could be also considered under section 3, 4, 5 and 6 in various stages as positivities in case the companies are working together in this field, and this would be a positive input in assessing their anti-competitive or pro-competitive behavior. So altogether, I fully agree and support that we need to work on this, and the answer, as she said, is a big yes. There is a role for the competition law, but competition law, I think, is fully geared for it. And now when we have before the Parliament Competition Amendment Bill 2022, maybe during the debate, this factor can also be considered and integrated. How can this be encouraged at this moment? Thank you very much.
Thank you. May I request now Mr. Augustine Peter to make his comments on. Shall I set up a timer?
Yes, you'd like to. Thank you very much, Chairman, panelists, distinguished participants. So I think speaking after a very enlightening Chairman's address and keynote address regarding the Shipwreck and River, and also for Chairman CCA's address, I don't have too much to add, but I think first of all, regarding the organization of this meeting, I had the opportunity also to attend CUT's conference related to the competition day. So I think it is a very good initiative by this time I find ISI is also doing hands. Now coming to climate issue, I think absolutely no doubt this is the burning issue before everybody. Nobody will doubt. You go to any fora, let it be UN, be it G20, G7, these figures dominate. Now we started at the multilateral level, international level, started with the 1992 sort of Stockholm summit. Then Paris made a lot of difference to the whole set targets, 1.5 degrees centigrade, above pre-industrial level and all. Then after a gap and with the shock, after the shock of COVID, we had COP26, which I think made a lot of pressure on the nations to how targets, and almost all the countries, including India, had nationally determined targets. And recently, we had a number of reports, especially the last one by UN, highlighting how serious the situation is, much more than what has been thought about. And we had this COP27. Now, realizing that this is an issue, now the discussion here is whether competition policy includes law also, but I think because it is a subset. Whether what is the role, but ultimately competition policy which encompasses all the types of policies, including trade policy, including fiscal policy, including monetary policy, environment policy, everything. So the question whether the competition policy has got a role, that may not be that relevant, because it is government policies all put together is competition policy. I will first speak a very limited sentences because time clock has already been set. So, and then come to competition law. Policy wise, basically what do we do? A government, international level, everybody has to, given the gravity of the situation, ABC analysis. What is it that is contributing to the emissions? What is the most important? It has been identified, and the expert is here, hydrocarbon. So that is the area, and everybody, international fora, everybody is just sort of beating that particular thing. But there, and efforts are being taken internationally all over, and coal is the main target, and coal on the crude. Now, efforts are being taken, and even in India, but there is some concept called fair transition. That transition has to happen, and here it has already been emphasized that what are the ingredients. First is finance, second is technology. I have seen that in COP26, we had undertaken some commitments. 2070 has been declared by the Prime Minister, even though the trajectory is to be defined. But when it came to 2027, we have noticed that because 2026, it was decided India's point of view regarding what is that folding down. It is not folding down, it's another terminology. Carbon, what that hydrocarbon?
Phasing down.
Phasing down. Now it has become, this time it is, they have insisted on phasing out. Because India's efforts of phasing down, that means it is not eliminated. But at the same time, we are faced with a phenomenon in Ukraine. And now everybody is coming back, thinking in terms of coal. Anyway, so what I am telling is that the most important thing is policy, and policy where? One is energy. That is the most important. Second is transport. See, I started some study, I am not able to recollect the data and all, but yes, transport is again one of the most important. That is why anyway, including energy is part of that. Then housing or building. Enormous amount of emissions can be saved by having eco-friendly or climate-friendly building, agriculture. So sector-wise, I think that is the policy-wise enormous scope for government. So that is one area. Now coming to, and again shift to renewables. Again, it has already been announced. Now coming to the role of competition laws. Law in the case of there is a market failure, there is no doubt. Because if you invest in a particular product and come out with a product, new product, climate friendly, just like LED lights, but initially there is no awareness, your cost is high, but when you come to the market, you will be sort of priced out. So there is need for some intervention. But the issue is whether that intervention should be ex-ante regulation or competition. That is the issue. Whether competition authorities should come to the picture or ex-ante it can be handled. What I wanted to say, I thought about it for some time, I am thinking about it. I feel that competition authorities' role is relatively limited. I'll come to that. So it should be ex-ante regulation, regulatory. For example, labeling standards should be insisted upon by the government authorities, internationally, nationally. This standard you label so that product it can have a premium, so that and then promote at public cost, not by the cost of the company. So that way ex-ante regulation has to be promoted. So I am coming given the limited time. Now coming to competition law. See, I was part of, it so happened that I happened to be there in 2002 when this was being the law, the drafting, everything was happening. There we were in the thick of competition discussion in the WTO. So there it was, we were resisting multilateral rules because we were not prepared. It was the same time that we were also preparing because in view of, in case that comes multilateral, we should have a modern competition law. There in the preamble you will find keeping in view the development of the country. There we suggested a modification keeping in view the stage of development of the country, which was actually not accepted finally. What I wanted to say, competition law in generally inevitably is pure and pristine. It is competition, 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 nothing else. It has been the tradition starting from 1888 or 1889, starting from Canada to only two exemptions remain, that is South Africa. South Africa brought in because of their apartheid struggle and all, they brought in backwardness and all in a indirect way. And European Union, because of their integration objectives, they brought in something. So these are the two only exemptions, deviating from pure competition. So that way, and again, even if competition authorities contribute, it is going to be very minuscule because 99.99% can be targeted by the policies and, if necessary, sort of ex-ante regulations. This is my view. Now coming to
1 minute.
yeah, only 1 minute. So okay, then see there are already provisions as Madam Dingar has pointed out. That is proviso to section 3.3. It is regarding sort of efficiency enhancing joint ventures. But it requires, it is basically efficiency enhancing. Then we have to analytical how it will be done. Dhanendra Kumar ji has already stated there is need of a sort of a guidelines. It requires enormous study because what happens in most cases, what is the cost is clear to me, but the benefits accrued to this dissipated. So how to identify? Because there is always a condition that the whoever is suffering loss, the benefit also has to at least directly, substantially accrue back to them. That is the competition principle. So I think that is something which is required. Again, there are provisions in 19, M and F and 20F, I think. So provisions are available related to development. So, but it cannot happen that people just in the pretext of environment, sustainability, you know, we are all human beings. There's a tendency to in the pretext, because during COVID times, limited period, yes, there was some guideline, but there it was very clear. What are the, because maybe kids yoga, maybe it is vaccines, but here it will be a substantial large number of every area, it will be there. So it is very important to define, even if these provisions which are existing in the competition law has to be exploited, it should be based on clearly defined guidelines and strict monitoring, and ultimately the contribution will be very, very limited. That's what I feel. That's my view.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much. I think may I now invite our professors. Dr. Abha, please go ahead.
Namaskar and good evening, and thank you so much, sir, Dr. Parekh, Mr. Mayaram, and all the distinguished panelists. It's really been a pleasure, and the audience, of course, thank you for being here for a very, of course, World Competition Day it is, and the topic chosen, as we were discussing over coffee earlier, is sustainability and how competition law can contribute into this whole sustainability drive. And just Mr. Peters just finished off saying that sustainability is into every aspect. So considering that, how can competition law contribute, and can competition law contribute at all? There has been, of course, a huge volume of work, like Jyoti said, in other jurisdictions. CCI also has done something like she elaborated, but I think the benefit of being one of the last speakers is also that you get to hear all the views and then sort of summarize that. So I'm glad that I got this opportunity at the end, because I'd like to encapsulate everything with the Dutch jurisdiction, what Netherlands has done. And I think that can be sort of the roadmap for us to follow, so to speak, because there are real issues that can crop up. As far as carbonization is concerned, as far as you're aware of the term greenwashing. Greenwashing is happening. SEBI is already dealing with it. It has come up with guidelines for companies to not get into these kind of practices. And I think somewhere the CCI will have to eventually deal with the issue. This is my personal opinion. Earlier over coffee we were also discussing between digital markets and the kind of orders and competition law jurisprudence that has been created post, we call it in academics 25th October 2022. It's humongous, and we had not imagined that we would be in an era discussing competition law so threadbare in digital platforms, but we are. So probably not far ahead from now, we might be discussing sustainability, the way things are changing. So let me quickly encapsulate everything for you. I know there's a time constraint. So there is complete consensus, as we can see on the board, as far as whether competition law can or should contribute to promoting sustainable development goals, and whether it can actually effectuate positive change while doing so. So mainly the perceptions and three sort of perceptions that exist right now. And this is basically because we are talking about two very conflicting institutions. We're talking about competition law, the objectives of which are very different, and sustainable development, which is talking about maintaining public faith for public good, and of course competition law, which is talking about barriers to entry, anti-competitive agreements, abuse of dominance, so on and so forth. So predominantly the arguments have arisen during the course of this debate, as we also are seeing, into three main categories. The first includes those who argue that competition law must be remodeled in order to promote cooperation and sustainable development, while acknowledging the risks of promoting cooperation. So there is this whole remodeling that we are thinking about. And they view collaborations amongst market players as an opportunity to promote sustainable efficiency. The second category consists of those who argue that competition law is not the ideal tool. I think Mr. Peters was sort of hinting at that, it is a pristine law. It should not be the law which should be getting into sustainable development goals probably because the sanctity of it has to be maintained. It is for market correction, for market reforms. And when market failures happens, but we also know the flip side that market failures have to be corrected by the competition regulator of any country. And primarily the reason for this is that the sustainability is a public interest objective and therefore it cannot fall within the scope of competition law because it could potentially lead to a conflict between the objectives of the two, what I mentioned earlier. And this is the strongest argument against the overlap between two of these issues. The third, of course, consists of those who are yet to decide, who are listening to us and they're not sure whether there exists an actual relationship between competition law and sustainability, which can actually work hand in hand to effectuate positive change. Each of the viewpoints have valid concerns. Because these are such niche areas, I feel threadbare discussion is required, and I'm glad we're all sitting here. We have to acknowledge the advantages and disadvantages of each of them, and then only we'll be able to discern the viability of the relationship between competition law and sustainable development. While competition law alone, I feel, it might not be able, and it may not be instrumental in achieving a sustainable future, I also feel it can definitely contribute to the global movement against climate change, and I'll sort of try and explain it with an example. If a company, for instance, decides to switch to green packaging because of all the compliances that exist, or because it is a very, very a sensitive company, very committed to SDGs, so it switches to green packaging, which is relatively more expensive than normal packaging. Consumers, as you know how the market functions, there are economists here, and Professor Roy earlier on mentioned about market failures, cost of production, marginal cost of production, so on and so forth. The consumers would simply switch to another substitute that does not have the green packaging because it is cheaper. Price sensitivity. Not all consumers are willing to pay for sustainable packaging until and unless all consumers are paying the same amount. So if you see, there are these apps these days, and you get the option of whether you want to go in for a sustainable packaging, environment friendly, or you don't. They did not charge for it, now they have some 3 rupees or 6 rupees. So these are options being thrown at consumers and being very price sensitive. I know some very educated people who would still go in for plastic packaging. So it is probable that not many consumers, even if they are very sensitive, so to speak, actually care enough to contribute to sustainability. So as a regulator, then what is the step? Do we force a command and control regime of a regulator? Does it command taxes? Does it command that extra 2 rupees, $2, whatever it is? And competition law, of course, how it comes into the picture is because it is very wary of collaborative initiatives, because the chances of market distortion and cartelization are extremely high. So I here moved on to a completely different perspective, a spectrum. But these are the issues that I'm throwing at you because of positive, and we can discuss it later. Cartels can form, and we all know cartels can have very negative effects on the market, such as reduction in output, reduction in innovation, which can also have an impact on the public interest goals such as sustainable development, etc. And I believe Jyoti was trying to explain through the example where she said that the opposite side, that one is of course cartelization amongst the companies, and the other problem is that nothing at all would happen, and then the CCI would have to sort of force sustainable development goals onto the public. That may or may not happen. So if companies were allowed to collaborate, then all the companies in the said industry could collaborate to use green packaging, thereby creating a larger demand. And consumers would not have many alternatives, and this would increase their willingness to pay, as all companies would have incorporated the green packaging cost in its total cost. So this might seem unfair at the end of the day to the consumer, since consumer welfare, and here I'm talking only in terms of price, takes a backseat. But we must consider the fact, and this is the discourse world over, that when we engage in conduct that is not environmental friendly, the price we pay, as we all know, is much higher.
2 minutes, sir. Time seems to fly.
Yes, sir. The effects of climate change, of course, like I was trying to explain, the price we pay is much higher. So the effects of climate change range from social, economic, environmental damages that increase the cost of living, etc., etc. So here I rest the example for a bit, and I say that it has been argued that certain green collaborative agreements amongst market players cannot be considered as anti-competitive because these agreements have genuine non-economic benefits that are pursuant to public policy. So probably for a minute, the antitrust regulator should not look that way. And here is the example of the Dutch jurisdiction. The Netherlands Authority for Consumer and Markets has published draft guidelines, it's available for all to see, on how competition law can promote sustainability. So I'll quickly summarize. The draft guidelines recognize that certain collaborative agreements do not restrict competition, while certain others do restrict competition. In cases where they do restrict competition, it has been suggested that the objective sustainability benefits naturally must outweigh the disadvantages caused by these agreements. And the parties are required to either quantitatively or qualitatively substantiate the benefits arising. And if I were to go back to my example earlier, if a group of firms collaborate to use green packaging, they must substantiate that the benefits from collaborating and using green packaging is much higher than the disadvantage of increasing the price of the product. So this is what the Dutch have done, and there are sustainability claims by this particular guideline, which lays down 5 rules of thumbs to assist businesses in ensuring their sustainability claims are not unclear, they are not incorrect or misleading. So here we are trying to deal with the greenwashing problem, because that is bound to happen in the best of jurisdictions. This is one example that I want to share with the audience, and of course, Jyoti has elaborated. CCI is yet to fully sort of jump into this game, but we can also look at, for those of you who are researchers here, some students also from the previous competition or batch for your benefit, the Australian jurisdiction, the Greek jurisdiction, the Lithuanian jurisdiction, and also New Zealand. Some of these jurisdictions have already sort of alerted and worked with their antitrust regulators to have sustainability norms, codes embedded within the antitrust regulator, so that cartelization within the very sensitive producers will not happen. I rest my case here, and thank you for the time given, and thank you for all of you being listeners.
Thank you very much. And where is Mr. Saraswati?
Present from here.
There you are. I know you are a professor and would like to talk a lot, but you restrict yourself to 10-12 minutes.
Sir, it will be only a 5 to 7 minutes presentation. So,
You can start talking.
yes. I'm extremely humbled to be part of this eminent team, and I have gained a lot of insights already from many of the eminent experts on competition law. And today, today as all of us discussing today, this year, as part of the World Competition Day celebration, this year's theme is on the climate change and environment-related issues. And environmental related issues, green technologies and sustainability has been an important issue which the countries across the world.
Just lift up the mic to bring it closer to.
Yes, it is working. It's okay. So environment-related issues and sustainability and green technologies have been an important issue which the countries across the world is facing. And there are environmental regulations on the quality of water, air, and forest conservation and all other aspects. And irrespective of these environmental concerns and regulations existing across the countries, it is alarming to know that around 12% of the deaths in the world in 2019 is caused by air pollution. And further, air pollution is one of the major reasons contributing to various health issues. And as per World Health Organization, WHO estimates, around 6 lakh children die every year due to respiratory infection caused by air pollution. So this in itself shows how important is the environmental issues to be tackled for the sustainable human development. And I'm showing some very two important indicators. One is on the PM 2.5 indicator, which shows which is one important standard indicator of pollution levels. Which the standard level is that if it is beyond 5, then it is considered as a very dangerous situation for the health. And in India's PM 2.5 level can be seen from here, and this is the purple. Purple is the most dangerous level, and it is now 58. The level is 58, and the standard level, as I said, is less than 5. That is one indicator. And the secondly, across the this one, PowerPoint is sorry.
The sustainable light.
Go ahead without the presentation.
Yes, it just comes. Okay, the next point is regarding the cities. Within India, there are 15 most polluted among the 15 most important cities in the Central and South Asian countries. India is home to 11 cities, and as per WHO standards, no city in India met WHO air quality guidelines of 5. And 58% of India's cities exceeded 50. So that is another point. And this is anyway. This I was showing the PM2 levels actually in the world as well as India, where India stands compared to the world. Anyway, it is. I will speak without PowerPoint.
Because you don't want us to hear.
No, I don't. So, इसका लूज कनेक्शन होगा कुछ चेंज कीजिए. So the another important indicator that is called the Environmental Performance Index, which is developed by the Yale University, Columbia University, in collaboration with some world organizations. It's okay, leave it, no problem. Okay, so another important indicator is the Environmental Performance Index. So this is taking into account 40 important indicators in the globe across the world, and it basically ranks various countries. 180 countries it tried to rank the environmental performance based on various environmental performance indicators. It includes environmental health, ecosystem, etc. and across 11 major categories, and India is ranked as 180th. That means the lowest. India's rank is the lowest among all the countries. And that too, the projections is that India, China, US and Russia will account for over 50% of the residual global greenhouse gas emissions in 2050 if the current trends hold. And another 24 countries, and it is termed very nicely as a dirty 2 dozen countries will account for more than 80% of the emissions by 2050 if we are not reviewing our climate related policies. So that in itself indicates that this is very important to tackle the environment related issues. So another point which they have mentioned is that there is a clear positive correlation between the performance of the countries as well as the performance of the countries and the environmental indicators. So next. So another issue is that the important issue is that where comes the industrial pollution in India? So what is the role of
see, the emphasis on our conversation has to be on the link between competition.
I am coming to that.
So we are going a lot into climate issues.
Next is on the
Very
industry.
critical and important, but
Yes,
perhaps
I will be linking that with this. So next is what is the role of industrial pollution contributing to the green to the issues. So where I am talking only two important things here. That is one important aspect is that industrial pollution is considered to be a key factor contributing to the overall pollution in India. And there is a study by Rita Pandey 2000 NIPFB which clearly states that many industries which are categorized as red industries. Red means the most polluting industries, which includes chemicals, recycling, paper, cement, iron and steel, paints, etc. So these are the industries which are having a major component in the overall output of the country. And another recent study by Khan and Tariq also emphasized that there has been an increase in the share of industries in red category over time. And there is an effect. Another point is regarding the green technologies and pollution control techniques are the major solution to the problem. And effective implementation of environmental regulations require the support from all regulators and companies and general public. And what is the role of competition policy here? And two ways environmental considerations can be taken up by the competition regulator. One is part of the section 3 and 4 cases where companies, so competition, before that actually I missed one slide, that's why. So competition policy is only one, competition law is only one subset of the industrial policy regulations trying to ensure fair markets and thereby protect the interest of both producers and consumers. The direct role of environmental issues comes through the cases taken up or filed with the regulator under Major 3 provisions, and the competition policy can play a complementary role in environmental regulations. So that is the point made by the Simon Holmes 2020. However, competition law is generally criticized. Competition Act is generally criticized for its narrowly defined product markets and also the narrow definition of the term welfare. That is, there are issues like concentration of economic power, ownership concentration, issues faced by small and medium enterprises, employment concerns arising out of M&As, foreign takeovers, etc., which the current regulations will not consider as a competition issue directly while making the assessment. So environmental issues can also be come under that. So though economic power is so in this regard, the point made by IAL 2013 on the economic power is also important. He has mentioned that though economic power is the heart of antitrust, the competition assessment is based on narrowly defined markets and quantifiable evidence in general, and generally ignore the political ramifications and the social harms caused by the economic power. So the environmental considerations can be taken up by the competition regulators in two ways. One is that as part of the section 3 and 4 cases, when the companies cooperate for introducing green technologies for sustainable future production, recognize it as welfare enhancing rather than restricting based on the cooperative behavior aspect. So that is one, and here the concern is on the pricing, that it can lead to the collusive pricing agreement between the parties cooperating. So my suggestion here is that the pricing should be taken as a separate from the innovation point. That is one. And secondly, on the M&A side, while assessing combinations, if one firm is having any green technologies, make sure that the green technologies are recognized and protected post-integration. So it is true that the consumers shift to cheap priced products without considering sustainable production techniques. The role of regulator here is to ensure that all producers follow green production techniques, so that the one introduced technology will not be adversely affected. And one option here may be to give the tax incentives to compensate for the losses. Also, those who are not implementing may be charged with a fine if the green technologies are available to everyone. So who will regulate? That is the next issue which Agustin sir also talking about. I think the overall environmental regulation should be done by the should come under the environmental regulations rather than the competition regulation. But competition regulation is applicable wherever the relevant cases comes in. And also here the appropriate cooperation between both regulators is also very important. Now, how to accommodate it under the Competition Act? So this has actually Jyoti ma'am has already discussed these things. So green technologies and environmental sustainability provisions can be included in the present regulation itself. So what we need to change is to change how we assess competition and welfare. So that basically the tool of assessment should be more flexible. And so there are various provisions under the current act itself. Section 19(3) DEF. So while assessing the appreciate adverse effect on competition itself, so there are provisions like D states about the benefits to consumers, E talks about the improvements in production, F talks about the technical, scientific and economic development by means of production with respect to the agreements. And with respect to the dominant position, section 19(4) KLM. So are talking about, so it can be incorporated under these sections where it is talking about social obligations, social cost. Then L talks about the relative advantage by way of contribution to the economic development, and M talks about the any factor which the commission may consider relevant for the inquiry, which ma'am has already discussed. And under M&As also there are provisions. Section 24 LMN, where it is dealing with the nature and extent of innovation. So that is one option where it can be incorporated. M, where the contribution to economic development is mentioned, and N, where the benefits to combination, whether the benefits to combination outweigh the adverse effect of combination, if any. So I think these are the areas in which already there is legislation which can be incorporated. So only thing is that we have to change our way of assessing the cases. And another possibility may be the relevant product market definition, where the products can be differentiated based on the production technology, where we can take into account the green technologies used. So assessment issues vary across cases, and the welfare trade-off can accommodate the clean air and the livable environment in its welfare criteria. So of course what we need is the cooperation with different agencies and also across various countries, because environmental issues are not pertaining to one country, because any air pollution or anything which is happening in one country, it will affect everyone across so the border will not be an issue there, will not be a concern there. So I think there I stop. Thank you.
I think we started about 10-12 minutes late, so we have finished 10-12 minutes after the time. So
I'd like to make just one point. sorry, you should not be taking more time, but I want to say this. After the entire discussion that we've had, I personally have reached this conclusion that, as we generally end up doing in most cases, we try and fit everything to suit that flavor of the season. I do not see any reason why competition law should be tweaked in any which way to bring in accommodation for climate change in its objectives or in its pronouncements. I was very intrigued, in fact, thank you very much, Alpha, because I was not aware of the kind of changes that have happened in European Union, but if you look at the Dutch law, what actually would happen is this would easily lead to regulatory capture, because the welfare, the concept of welfare when it comes to one or two or three industries is easy to discern. But when it's economy-wide, because climate change impacts everything, whether it is services, infrastructure, industry and everything, then the concept of welfare becomes so nebulous that it would be so easy to capture the regulator and also to create cartels of a different kind, which would be very difficult to dismantle. So I would rather go with what Augustine said, that if we really need to push climate change, the climate issues, then it is ex ante regulation. You need to do it in two ways. One is in terms of standards, which you lay out these standards, they have to be followed in production, in the kind of products that you're bringing out. We have done that in many cases. For instance, recyclable plastic. In many cases, you cannot have plastic products being recycled and used again for food products and things like that. We have put a prohibition on that. So if the law puts a prohibition, there's no question of pricing going up and down and having agreements amongst the industry, because that's the law. And the second one is, as I mentioned, prohibition. So these two things, standards and prohibitions, are the ones which should be used to push this. There is one thing which, sir, I would like to mention very briefly on finance. I think we have simply not understood how finance works in the case of climate change. The entire argument and debate and discussion is based on debt, one, everything, whether it is sustainable bonds, climate bonds, green bonds, etc., it's all debt. And it is mostly public expenditure. Public expenditure. Because even if you look at the UN targets and sustainable development goals, etc., the contribution of the private sector is less than 15% in total financing. So, debt sustainability of governments is suspect. And therefore, it's a non-starter. That's the first thing that I would like to say. And the second part I would like to say is that even though there is global liquidity, the problem that arises is in terms of current account deficits of most of the countries. So even if you are able to borrow money from outside, it impacts your current account or balance of payment issues. So I think we need to have a very granular discussion on finance, which I don't see happening in the public discourse is not there.
I think you need finance with 10-year moratorium on paying and a 2% interest rate. Then you will find that yes, it becomes almost possible for a country like India to meet its climate change goal and still not really some significant loss of GDP might take place. But it is yet to be proven. This is my conjecture that this may.
No, sir, but the fiscal deficit hits you even if it is 10 years. If your total debt portfolio is of a particular kind, it hits your sovereign rating. And with it, so the whole rules of the game need to
What
change.
happens is, suppose we have invested this money in photovoltaic power, okay, solar power. Then solar power doesn't require any annual expenditure the same way as carbon core power requires. And therefore some amount of saving and GDP gain will be there in some sense. Because your cost of inputs will go down, or the level of inputs will go down. So I think this is my, as I said, it's a guess.
So public accounting is annual.
Yeah.
And savings are over 10 years or 50 years, so your sovereign credit rating is still intact. Anyway, this is not the forum for introduction.
Right. Yeah, so we have some time for questions and answers. So I will invite questions first from the audience. Anybody? Yes, please go ahead. But please speak in the mic and don't look at me and when ask a question, so speak in the mic and answer.
I thank the joint organizers, the CUTS, ISID and CCI for organizing this World Competition Day 2022 event on the issue of competition policy and climate change and giving me an opportunity to participate in it. So actually I have two short queries and I know one of the panelists and experts can answer it. So I want to say that as we have discussed that, I want to know that what are the roadblocks which we are facing in implementing the much discussed carbon tax or green tax so as to add cost to the carbon emitters. And public and private institutions like CCI, CUTS, ISID and civil society organizations working in this sector can, they can all make contributions in taking this forward and fructifying this thing. And secondly, more than 5 years back, Government of India announced the phasing out of IC, internal combustible engines in the automotive transport sector to replace it with EVs and electric mobility. And so are we by 2030? So target is to phase out the IC and replace it by electric mobility by 2030 in both the public and private transport and personal vehicles segment. So are we on course to meet these targets, and can this new proposed the competition law, which was originally enacted in 2002 and which is now under amendment as has been discussed, can it address these concerns and go beyond the issue of merger acquisition and amalgamations and address these and other concerns as well to address the issues in a holistic and complete manner? Thank you.
Thank you. Questions, please be brief and want questions, don't make comments. Please make.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Just a short comment on the previous speaker's statement when he mentioned about phasing out of the internal combustion engines. I think even here the government is not clear on what they really want. Because the Prime Minister is on record as saying that the refining capacity will be doubled in the next 5 years. So if we are phasing out the internal combustion engines, what are we going to use this refined petroleum products for? Then, on this question of collaboration among industry, whether they should be permitted as one of the means of dealing with climate change technologies, it raises one question. Can we be assured that if industries collaborate and they come up with one solution, is that really going to be the best solution? Would it not be more effective if they were made to compete and then you could choose which of these competing technologies is more effective? Or in any case, let the end user choose which technology they consider as being more effective. Now, we are all aware that this crisis situation which we have reached now of climate change, it has been the result of wasteful consumption of resources by the rich countries. And this wasteful consumption continues even today. And they are not willing to put any checks on that. But they want the developing countries to make sacrifices in their future development programs. And if we take the situation of India, rather firstly, let me mention the world
We
situation.
can all cry our heart out about the injustice,
Yes.
but nobody is listening.
Now, I just want to put this in perspective, that over the last 100 years, the world has seen a period of rapid population growth. In 1928, the world's population reached 2 billion. In less than 100 years, we are now 8 billion. And in the same period, India's population has grown 6 times. And we have a very large number of poor people who have rising aspirations. So with these restraints upon us of reducing emissions, how are we going to provide for the demands of this increasing population? Hopefully, their economic situation would be better than what it is today, and they will demand more goods, more power
I
consumption.
think leave some time for other questions. Please, any other questions?
Thank you.
Sir, good evening. My name is Shyam Sundar. I am from Mahindra and Mahindra. So at M&M, we have placed that by 2040, Mahindra will be a carbon neutral company, and we have been lot of efforts in manufacturing the electric vehicles, hydrogen fuel vehicles, etc. So my question is that India is currently discussing free trade agreements with many developed countries. For example, we are discussing with European Union, with UK, Canada, etc. And there are a lot of non-trade issues we call. For example, sustainability, climate change issues, labor issues, gender issues. They are all part of these free trade agreements. So how means like Indian companies will prepare themselves from Indian private sector? We are having apprehension that we a lot of disadvantages in like dealing with these issues and exporting our products and commodities from India to these countries. So what are the government processes or what should be the right approach for that?
Any other questions, observations? Please.
The brief question. My question, in fact, I would like to ask industry and follows again the global nature of it. WTO, I mean, you mentioned about that around 2002, there was talk about Untitled Chapter watching WTO. And then India was not well prepared to get the new issues about before digesting the old issues that were already on table. My question is that now time has moved on and we have identified that climate change is a global issue. Digital inequality are global issues and lots of competition policy aspect has to go into it to close that. So don't you think that we have now some of the ingredients of a multilateral competition policy and then South, because global South to push for a multilateral competition policy for moving on this? Thank you.
Okay, before the panelists answer this, let me observe a few things and then, for example, yes, please go ahead.
Is there any direct
No,
connection?
no, speak in a mic.
Is there any direct connection between these
Speak in the
two?
mic, not at me.
Is there any direct connection between these two, the competition and this controlling monopoly power? If that is there, this can work productively. And why should an individual or a single company should worry about climate change economically? What is the incentive? Can somebody?
Okay. I think good questions, but please go ahead. Let me observe a few things very briefly. Labeling and information can work as it is done. We have seen the advanced labeling. People are on their own account buying more star-rated, higher star-rated products. But it doesn't work here. We have sunlight available, all the windows have been blocked and all the lights are on. So that kind of things do not work. I mean, it requires change in attitudes and so on. I think I completely agree that having people, companies cooperate, the difference between cooperation and collusion becomes very, very marginal and very difficult to do. And just because you say everybody has the same product packaging and the price has gone up, that doesn't mean the consumers are willing to pay more. It's only that some of them are not able to afford it anymore. And finally, I would say that, that market friendly should not necessarily mean only competition, but it could mean anything that incentivizes people to behave in the right way. Okay. But other than that, let me ask the panelists to respond to whatever question and observation they want to. I think 2 minutes each, not more than that. Huh?
I think I can speak on 3 issues. I think one is FTAs and climate. Normally, I had the first FTA, Sri Lanka, and last year in Congress in Singapore also. So I have some experience in this regard. But what is possible, because climate, especially environment, these issues we cannot avoid them. Government can try to whittle down and things, but ultimately, after in 2020 it is impossible. Otherwise, nobody will come forward, especially countries which matter. You can sign with some banana republic, it will make any sense for you. Your trade will be with them. So I think only possibility is that get time. Phase out or come to that standard over a period of 10 years. Because with Sri Lanka, what we have done is that when we liberalized in 3 years, they were given 10 years time. I find no other way. I think we can get time to negotiate it. There is nothing more I can find. Regarding competition, WTO and related, I think your query. See, in fact, their Singapore issue is 3, basically with trade facilitation apart. Investment, competition and transparency. Our objection was to investment. But it was coming as a package. In fact, I was dealing with all the 3. It has been taken away, taken out of WTO. That is the only instance in WTO where the issues have been taken away, out of the, even now it has not come back. Only investment we were targeting, but they were presenting as a package. Competition, our argument in WTO, in forum, in working group was that we want a strong agreement. We don't want a peer review process. Okay, but the fact that because investment we did not want at that point of time, now I don't know, even now I think there is resistance. Competition we want because it benefit. But the other one was a posturing. So that is very clear. Now it is 20 years ahead. I don't think there will be any resistance to competition. And regarding climate also, it's a global issue. Any change in competition should be based on some understanding at the global level. Each country, because it is better than neighbor policy, Because if you change, it is to the disadvantage of your company, and others are not changing. So you are actually making time in the hands of your companies, and others are going ahead, they will be. So I think that is something. Regarding what you are asking, that is the whole discussion here, that competition monopoly, because there is a chance of market failure, and it is very much there. Because you produce, innovate and will come with a new product, but people are not aware. So other products which are lower in value, similar this thing, just like examples were given here, I think already. So that's why there is need for government or regulators to intervene, or to provide incentives, or to standards to be set, and even prohibit lower standard products which are emitting. I think I stop here. I think 2 minutes are over.
Please go ahead.
I would agree that the environmental issues have to be primarily dealt by government policy by providing the right incentives and the right penal provisions, so that the corporates and enterprises are driven and encouraged to adopt clean energy and more efficient products and services. But having said that, I think competition law still has a limited role. Of course, wherever there are cartelizations and cartelizations in order to ensure that environment-friendly products and services do not get encouraged, definitely the role is very clear. But on the other side, there can be certain situations, and I fully agree that these will be exceptions rather than rule, where collaborations may have to be allowed, particularly in terms of technology, given that they may involve huge investments, and also given that we may not have enough time. So yes, these have to be in exceptional circumstances, but having said that, competition law cannot just perhaps completely shut their eyes to this aspect.
Thank you, sir. So, two short points.
Since you are taking more time presenting, you will less time answering.
I thought it was the other way around. I took the least time, but okay, thank you. So anyway, I have two very short points to make. So number one, about industries collaborating with one another, and so where I'm coming from is the total cost of production, which I think I mentioned earlier also, because there might come a point where every regulator is talking about sustainability, and maybe then the total cost of production for the entire industry, so to speak, will go high, and the final brunt of that would be borne by the consumer. So in that scenario, then consumer welfare would kick in, and how? But that, of course, for that, a lot of extraneous factors would be in the picture. Difficult to sort of think of right now. But I was having this morning, before coming here, a discussion with Dr. Sahu, where we are planning to write a piece on, again, your marginal cost, your total cost of production, which I think Professor Roy mentioned earlier, that if the when you decide the minimum cost of production, what is it? Do you include the sustainability practices of a company also within that? So naturally it will go up. And then, like the panelists here mentioned, that the cost of production, then why would I as an enterprise, as one unit, increase it? Because nobody would buy my product, it would go to another, the consumer would go to another entity. So these are issues definitely which are, I would say, not directly related to competition law, but they will be, I think they will need some sort of attention. Then the other thing is, of course, compliance by private entities and companies, where we, at IICA, we did do a lot of capacity building, and the whole idea was self-regulation, and a lot of, at least the compliances which are utmost have to be done. And therein we talk about greenwashing and how to avoid all of that. So these are two small points that I thought were extremely important to begin with. Thank you.
Thank you. Yes.
So I think almost all points are already discussed. So one question was on the collaboration is the best solution for communication, because I think that was one question because not directly missed, but not indirectly missed, but directly.
Please answer.
So that I think it is very clear, because collaboration, most of the innovations which may be very costly and it requires a lot of investment, and it may not be like many times it may not be successful also. So collaboration may be the best solution. So it is the point. And regarding my contribution is that environmental issues are very crucial. So it needs to be incorporated as part of the competition regulation. But how it is incorporating, I think that is very clear. And collaboration. And the thing is regarding the sectoral issues, which sir also mentioned, like many sectors may be facing more pollution or those kind of issues may be generating. So I think in those cases may be associated with more care.
Yes, please go ahead.
Basically, regarding collaboration and this thing of this cooperation, why section that proviso to section 3.3 was, because I am aware of that. Why? Because basically what happened, for example, see automobile sector, somebody is there. From you use water, for example, I'm just imagination, I think there is maybe work is being done. In lieu of petrol or diesel, there is some research they want to do. But one company, they may not have an interest because the probability of succeeding may be 0.1 or 10% less than that. So they collaborate on that to R&D, for example. Then that type of collaboration, that is the basic intention. So if you extend to that type of thing, efficiency enhancing to all areas, then it should be with a big important ring fencing. Otherwise it will be just exploited by everybody. Then it will be very difficult. So that is one important thing. And second, just to your question, I just want to add. One is time, second is technology transfer.
Yes.
Because recently you will find that COP27, Prime Minister last time compared to when they were facing down, they will change to facing out, then he stated that our commitment in certain respects is subject to financing and technology coming in, subject to. Certain commitments we made, especially in hydrocarbon, subject to. So I just wanted to say.
So, just 5 seconds. So one point that I missed earlier on was the Bharti Airtel case, where if there is a conflict between two regulators, and I believe any such, the topic of discussion today is a conflict, possible conflict between an environmental regulator or any other sectoral regulator and the Competition Commission. Then it has to be read together, and of course, only where there is a competition violation, the matter would come to CCI. Otherwise, if it is a sectoral violation, and for the purpose of this discussion, if it is environmental violation, then it would go to the environmental regulatory authority. So I think that if we have that much clear as far as our jurisprudence is concerned, then CCI would be limited to only the violation of antitrust. So that is right. Thank you. Thank you for the time, sir.
Let me conclude by thanking the panelists and also the participants. With one or two final observations, we talked a lot about cooperation, collaboration and compete. In Netherlands it might work because there was such a Calvinistic trait in the culture that they are very responsible, and responsible in a much larger and a wider and a philosophical religious sense. So I think that's a very different environment than multicultural, multi-linguistic, many times India can work or so on. Finally, I think doesn't violate IPR laws, do not violate proportionality, because as Newton said, if I found something done, look at little farther, because I have been standing on the shoulders of the giants. All innovations are really building on the innovations of lots of people and work of many other people. So I think that is one of the fundamental disease of the society, and on which a lot of so-called competition is based. But thank you all. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. On behalf of clerks, sir, and IST, I would like to thank all the panelists. And what the session, there may be less participation, but I think the points on the table has created more clarity in some of our minds. And as I just recently heard live, the Nobel laureate John Reward, and who got his Nobel Prize on Market Power, he was speaking on climate change in Jakarta. And he said that whenever there is a market failure, then government comes.
When I see here, we will know very important run role you are there. No, it should not be publicized.
Well, in Jaipur, MNI.
Jaipur and even in India.
Yeah.
Either brought for
Yes, yes. So he said that climate change, like inequality, is one of the outcome of the market failure. And since government has not intervened all over, one, so there is a government failure. And that is why here the role of the civil society comes. And the understanding of civil society, I think, from this panel has increased. And we will publicize the project globally. And I think some very good points from India as well from this panel. And thank you all, the panelists, the audiences, and also from on behalf of Kurtz and Sir, we thank IISIT for giving this platform for us to celebrate and just have a high tea of celebrating Kurtz. Thank you.
That level.